Good evening, New Bedford Guide followers. My name is Chris Resendes. Starting tonight, every Thursday, 7 o'clock, we'll be live on New Bedford Guide with mostly political discussion, local topics, and some hot topic national stuff. Good current events in the area. We'll also be dealing with a lot of feel-good stories that happen in our community to build up our community with this show, with the New Bedford Guide. Each Thursday, 7 o'clock, tune in live. We'll have many guests, and tonight I'm very happy to have our first guest, Sheriff Tom Hodgson from the Bristol County Sheriff's Office. Good evening, Sheriff. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris. It's great to be here.
Get the nerves out of the way. We've been talking for the past 5 minutes, but to get the night started, I figured we'd pick a good topic, something that actually I had left your department back in 2001 in June. Was my last week with the Bristol County Sheriff's Office. I had a short couple years there, but I did learn a lot while I was there. And this past week, we're remembering 9/11. It's hard to think that it was 16 years ago now.
Yeah.
You know, it's been a long, long time. I know that yourself and the department members did send a coalition down to help out at Ground Zero. If you want to queue up Media One, we got some pictures of yourself and some of your officers dealing with Ground Zero at the time, helping out law enforcement, helping out the community, whatever you all did. As a department, when you were down there, what did you see that helped you evolve as a leader?
Well, you know, it's ironically, in 1998, I was sent to Washington, D.C. to study, at that time, weapons of mass destruction. So there was no Homeland Security name at that time. And I went down with 125 other first responders from around the country. We spent 4 days there. And as I was going through the training, terrorism's now on the forefront. You guys are going to be the frontline defense. I thought to myself, this is great training, but New Bedford, Fall River, probably not. But good training, come back and we'll start building the Homeland Security Task Force and so forth. Little did I know on 9/11, I would literally be standing on the front steps of the U.S. Capitol when those planes hit.
Okay.
And it was at that time that when I went over to the congressman's office, I was there to testify on a prison reform bill for a congressman out of Florida. I went to the congressman's office. I looked at the television when I walked in. He said, "Hey, did you hear what happened in New York?" Because I had just heard from a Capitol Hill officer who had walked up to me on the steps when the plane hit and said a plane hit, and I felt like everyone else, it was just a stray plane. I told the congressman, "Yeah, I heard a plane hit the Trade Center." He said, "No, there's been two." And it was at that moment that I realized that my training down in 1998 was suddenly very relevant. We continued to try to have a discussion, but obviously distracted. Somebody knocked on the door and said, "Congressman, a plane's just hit the Pentagon." I grew up in Washington, and I was watching as things were unraveling, and I saw people, even congressmen, who were standing on the street corner near me saying, "Well, what are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to go?" I heard them talking to each other. And it suddenly occurred to me that this was a time for America to step forward with all of us who have opportunities in leadership positions. I immediately went back to Boston. I had 2 staff members with me. We drove back up. And we then, I called New York, said, "Look, we have a mobile command center that's been on order. It should be in any time. We're willing to come down and help." I took 50 people down there, and we spent about 5 weeks in Ground Zero. And Rudy Giuliani, I thought, captured that time better than anyone. He said, "You know, we witnessed the absolute worst of humanity, but we're also witnessing the absolute best."
Rudy was an all-star during 9/11, well, the aftermath of
Right.
9/11.
But you saw people coming. There were Japanese firefighters that showed up in full uniform
Yeah.
at one of the firehouses, didn't speak a lick English, and wanted to know, how can we help? And that's what you saw there. It was an amazing time in our history. Sadly, it was a tragedy that brought all of us together as one. Nobody in that Ground Zero looked at themselves as a Democrat, Republican, firefighter, sheriff, that we were all Americans. And 16 years later, and I was speaking at the battleship this past 9/11, and I said this very thing that I'm talking about now. Here we are 16 years later. Let's now all of us come together at a time our country's divided, and let's remember that our common purpose, not how we get there, but where we need to go, is what should matter to all of us and what we should keep our eye on in regards to the Honorable.
Part of the reason I brought this up was partly, to reflect on the anniversary that just passed. But we're also in a time in our country that like you stated, that we are so politically divided, like beyond repair at some points, some would think. Not at any point in my life have I felt more patriotic and more American than I did on 9/11. Nobody cared if you were Southern, Confederate flags, American flags, statue this, a Donald Trump voter, a Hillary Clinton supporter. Everybody was just American. Nobody cared about the skin color. I remember seeing everybody helping everybody. And it was a good time to be an American, and at a horrible time, which is kind of weird. And we kind of saw that again this past, week and a half ago with the hurricane down in Texas, where the week before there were people in Charlottesville and Boston hitting each other and toppling statues and making a big deal about, issues that instead of speaking humanely to each other.
Right.
You saw the infighting on Facebook and every social media, name calling and the political division. These tragedies tend to bring Americans together, and it's sad that it takes the loss of life and the loss of property, like we're seeing in Texas, to get Americans to be American.
It's interesting. My father used to tell us as kids throughout my life, he'd always remind us every so often that he'd say, always remember that God writes straight with crooked lines. And to your point, sadly, we, after 9/11, we started to see things fall off. Less flags on the bridges, less flags on people's homes. Suddenly people were back into the minutia of themselves as opposed to the common good and the common interest that we have. And so, as you mentioned about the hurricanes, therein lies the crooked line that brings us back and gives us the perspective that we need. But the important thing to what you're saying, Chris, and you're exactly right, is let's seize this moment at our time in history where we have an obligation for the next generations to heal our country, to bring it together, still having political differences, ideological differences at times, and respecting the opposing view, being willing to listen, and in the end saying, it's okay, I don't necessarily agree with that point of view, I know you do, but in the end, wherever the majority lies is what our system is based on and what we all believed our forefathers put together so we could move this country forward. And that, to me, is what I think elected leaders need to do at this time in history. We had the opportunity following 9/11, it fell off. I remember, and I often say this, about how sad it was to see at that moment that you talked of patriotism. We all felt it throughout the country. 2 days after 9/11, you saw members of Congress, senators, congressmen, standing on the front steps of the U.S. Capitol, Democrats, Republicans, holding hands, singing God Bless America.
Yes, sir.
And do you know, I remember saying at that time, I hope somebody captures a picture of this, blows it up, and hangs it in both chambers in the U.S. Capitol as a constant reminder that this is why you are here. And exactly what you were doing at that time ought to be the thing that we ought to be doing each and every day you're here, finding ways to keep America together, still having our political differences, but understanding in the end we're all Americans.
Absolutely. To close on this topic, you and I had told you this, with a division politically, when we sat down and spoke the other day, you in your Facebook, you're going through the swamp of comments and, friends post and this and that. And I had a friend call me unhinged because of my right-leaning beliefs, and it really struck a nerve, because I looked at him and there's an intelligent individual, someone growing up that I said, you are a very smart person. And if he's listening, I know he knows who he is. how could you say something like that? You know, I'm unhinged. What makes me unhinged? I said, you know, this morning, you and I both woke up. I'm a good family man. I consider you a good family man, I told him. I got my kids bathed. I got them ready for daycare at the time. My son now just started pre-K, as you know. I had a tough day with him. I made sure my bills were paid. I got dressed for work. I put one leg on at a time, just like you did. My bills were paid. I made sure my wife was okay, that she was ready for her day, if I could do anything to help her. Went to work, came home, neatened up the house, paid some bills online. The wife usually takes care of that mostly, but sometimes I help with that. You know?
Hopefully the cooking too.
I do a lot of cooking. I'm pretty good.
Do you?
I'm a grill master.
Okay.
You know, I don't toot my own horns a lot, but I do when it comes to cooking. I can cook.
Yeah.
I can burn a little food. But I went and I thought I lived my life as a decent human being today. But you know, then I watched a little Fox News and a little CNN, and I got into a little political debate with you, and that was this much of my day. Besides the politics of our day, which is minimal, extremely minimal, you and I, as good human beings, did exactly the same thing today.
I remember you telling me that, and I thought that was a great way to approach that person's point of view, because frankly, I think what he said to you to begin with was exactly what's wrong in our country today. There is this intolerance of, and I'm not saying that just about this particular individual. It's people in different pockets who, if you don't agree with some people, they'll say, you know what? If you don't agree with me, then you're foolish. You're this or that, and it's reduced to name calling. So we can't look. It's okay. It's okay to have your back and forth discussion. Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. They debated vociferously on issues. But you know what they did after work, after they did all that? They went and sat and played cards and had a couple drinks together. And you know what? They didn't take it personally. They knew that this country was built on differing points of view, and that the very strength of our nation, our ability to move forward, was because we did have people who had opposing views who, when they listened, could maybe modify their positions in a way that made sort of a melding of both, in some cases, that made it an even stronger solution to the problem they were faced with. And that's really how we have to look at it today. You know, we're Americans first. We all grew up differently, different perspectives. Our parents come from different places.
Absolutely.
But not any one of them is 100% right. And none of us are. You know, so
Nobody's ever 100% right.
no.
As much as I'd like to say so, I don't even get it right 50% of the time, half the
look,
time.
we're all, we try though. As long as we give 100% trying.
Absolutely. But we
that's
have
the
to
important
respect
thing.
each other.
Absolutely. There's no question about it.
Let's move on to the next topic.
Sure.
You're on your second employee of recent times that's been arrested in connection with Carlos Rafael. Media 2 on this one. Where are we at with that? I know that Antonio Freitas has been convicted. He's awaiting his sentence. And now Jamie, is he on suspension at this time?
Yeah, the second individual has been suspended without pay.
Without pay. Okay.
As outlined in our procedures.
Yes, sir.
So at this point, obviously for me personally, for the department, it's very disappointing when these kinds of things happen. And so we're,
I know Jamie, and I've always
Yeah.
thought highly of him.
Yes.
And I'm a little sad myself that I have to actually bring this up.
Right, of course. Look,
But
this
in the
is
fairness of media, we have to speak of the good stuff and the bad stuff.
right, and as you know, in the case of the latest situation, that individual was very very active in the community, getting all kinds of initiatives going around food baskets and all kinds of things. But things happen, and we hope that they don't, but sometimes they do, and that's where we are now. So it's
I know that you're hoping that nothing else falls from this. Do you foresee any other issues? Have any other law enforcement agencies contacted you and saying, "Hey, we're also investigating these officers"? Or?
I don't have any anticipation that we would have any other situations around this at all. Um, the first two were obviously very surprising and shocking to me.
Absolutely.
So can't say for 100%, but I feel pretty confident that there will be no additional issues for our department.
Awesome. That's good to hear. We'll have to follow up once,
Sure.
this moves on. We're going to move on to the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, DACA. It's a hot topic issue. A lot of people have an opinion on it. A lot of people actually don't know what it is.
Yeah.
For the most part, to be quite honest with you. I'm going to read just verbatim what is DACA and what are the requirements for DACA, and we'll go from there. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals is a kind of administration relief from deportation. The purpose of DACA is to protect eligible immigrant youth who came to the United States when they were a child from a deportation. When they were children from deportation, DACA gives young undocumented immigrants, 1, the protection of deportation, 2, a work permit, and the program expires after 2 years and is subject to renewal. There are requirements. 1, that you are under 31 as of June 15, 2012. 2, they first came to the United States before their 16th birthday. And 3, they lived continuously in the United States from June 15th of 2007 until the present. The next requirement is that they were physically present in the United States on June 15th, 2012, and at the time of application. They also must have come into the United States without documents before June 15th, 2012, or lawful status expired on that same date. That they are currently studying or graduated from a high school or earned a certificate of completion from high school or GED, or have been honorably discharged from the Coast Guard or military, completion also qualifies. And finally, that you have not been convicted of a felony, certain significant misdemeanors, including a single DUI, which a lot of have been arrested for DUIs, or 3 or more misdemeanors of any kind. On September 5th, Trump announced that he's going to be phasing this out. It really wasn't an end to the program as the media made it out to be. It was more of a, hey, Congress. Obama in 2012 said that this was a temporary fix for Congress to make a permanent fix. We're now in 2017.
Well, it's worse than that, Chris. Let me tell you why. First of all, President Obama was told that he actually said publicly that what I'm doing is not legal.
Yeah, we do have a clip of it.
Oh, you have a clip of it. So by beginning, and when you just read all of those things, those different requirements and so forth, stipulations, think about this. These are people who are here illegally. And I get that some of them, their parents brought them here. But if you're 31 years old, you're not here legally. You're brought here at a younger age. You've had plenty of time to become a U.S. citizen. That's number one. Number two, is it any wonder that people that want to immigrate to this country are confused by all these different mixed messages that are going out about whether or not you need to follow the immigration law?
Yeah.
I mean, it's outrageous that and it's being done. Look, I guess the best way I could explain this, I've been working on immigration reform for 20 years, working with Henry Hyde on the Republican side and Barney Frank going back to 1999, 2000. We did get a reform bill through the House. It never made it through the Senate because it was a continuation of use it for a political football, see which side can make the other look worse. But here's the truth that everybody needs to know. And that is that we are having these discussions, you and I and others, okay, in homes, tables, all dining room tables, for however many there are anymore, about whether or not this one should be able to stay, that one should be able to stay, even if they're here illegally, whether or not we should like make special classes so people don't have to follow laws and all these other things. And we're having these discussions because we're all frustrated that for 20 years, 30 years, Congress has failed to sit down and drill down and do this. Now imagine if we owned a company and for 30 years we're still trying to figure out how we're going to get the product out the door, but we got the company going, right? We don't do that, okay?
You don't last that long.
Yeah, no, but the point is that Congress is more interested in taking care of themselves than they are drilling down and providing a good, comprehensive, legitimate immigration reform plan. If they were interested in that, they would have sat down and said, okay, what do we need to do for security at our borders? 20 years ago. All right, just tackle that. Then what about the number of visas and what types of visas? Do we need to increase the number of people that will be allowed to come here legally?
That's all part of it. People are just saying, hey, Trump wants to get rid of all these people, and the Republicans want to get rid of all these people. There's no one in their right mind that just wants to throw out a guy that's been in this country doing the right thing for 20 years. Because I know plenty of people that are U.S. citizens that I'd rather them get thrown out
Right.
than these hardworking individuals who are doing the right thing while they're here, but they got to do it the right way.
But remember too,
You just can't.
That-
We're a land of law where you just have to have rules that need to be abided by, or else we're not the United States of America.
right, and what do you say, I mean, should the people who are standing on the USS Massachusetts on July 4th, raising their right hand and being sworn as American citizens who respected the laws of the United States, waited their turn, paid their fees, did all the right things they were supposed to do under the law, should they be, when they're sitting there in one of their proudest moments, raising their right hand, be for even a fleeting moment wondering, am I a fool? Should I have just disrespected the laws of the United States, snuck in, not paid anything? Because it seems like they are letting
There's
anybody
no
that wants to
repercussion.
come here to be able to do it.
Yeah.
We can't have that in America.
No, you got to
Because
give incentive for people to do things the right way.
what would you do if, and this falls right into the immigration law, right? So the federal government is responsible for the Congress creating laws around the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, the FCC for communications, immigration. What if New Bedford Airport says, you know what, I don't like the flight pattern that the FAA is telling me I have to follow to get to Canada because it takes me 20 minutes longer than the one I want to take. So you know what? I've been trying to get this changed for years. They're not changing it. So you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and fly this flight pattern. That's probably the best analogy of what's going on in immigration.
Absolutely. Bringing that up, let's hear. Let's go to Media 3, and we'll bring up Mayor Mitchell speaking about Daca. And we'll see what his New Bedford Airport flyover analogy that he used is, in his opinion, when it comes to Daca and the city of New Bedford. Well, it looks like we're having a little technical difficulty with the interview. Basically, the mayor doesn't agree with Donald Trump on the issue, and he feels that it's unfair to eliminate the DACA program, which back in 2012, we have Media 4 of Obama actually stating that it was a temporary fix and that Congress needed to legislate this. It was actually brought up many times in court systems where the executive branch cannot legislate, and this was another example of one where Obama was told he can't do that. What happened is the rules were brought up, that he brought up, the designation of DACA was brought up, and, excuse me, I was distracted, and when he did it in a manner, it was a memorandum type deal, like an executive
Order, right?
And he told his federal officers not to get these guys, not to leave them here, don't deport them, don't start the process, which he can do, but he cannot legislate. Now, if there's rules on the book for immigration, he doesn't have to deal with this. Donald Trump is not asking anybody to follow his rules.
Right.
What he's doing is saying, let's make the damn rules already.
Yeah.
So a big thing came out yesterday, and I think it affects the city.
The laws that are on the books, if you want to change them,
Do it.
change them. But in the meantime,
Follow
as
the rules.
the chief executive officer of this land, my responsibility is to make sure that these laws are equitably enforced across the board and that they're enforced. And he can't, as president of the United States, sanction the idea that we're going to pick and choose which laws and how much of those laws we're going to follow because we don't like them. Imagine if everybody started doing that on everything. This country would be total anarchy.
We don't have to imagine it, Sheriff. It's happening.
Well,
It's happening in this city. It's
Right.
happening in this state,
right.
where executives and administrations are telling their law enforcement agencies, law enforcement officers, not to prosecute people, not to arrest people, and not to do their job.
Well, you raise a good point, and I'm going to give you a good example for the listeners and the viewers to really hammer home this point. There was a trooper recently, about 3 or 4 months ago, Tacoma, Washington, where Washington State's a sanctuary state. He gets called to an accident scene. He arrives at the accident scene, gets both driver's licenses, runs both people. One of them comes back. It says this person, is here illegally, has been deported twice, has been convicted of a serious felony, contact ICE. He got on his cell phone at the accident scene, called ICE and said, listen, this is what just came out when I ran this person's tag. His license. I have him at the scene here. They said, thank you very much. We'll be right there. They came within 5 minutes and took him into ICE custody. When that trooper went back to work the next day, his supervisor approached him and said, you're under investigation. He said, for what? For contacting ICE. So this trooper, when he got this call to go to the scene, had two choices. Do his job and uphold his oath to the people and his promise to the people that he would do everything he should do to protect them against potential harm and get disciplined for it, or ignore ICE's notification and commit a felony under federal law and commit a crime. Those were his only two choices.
That's not a choice.
We can't have our law enforcement officers in this country paralyzed as when they're enforcing laws that are on the books.
You don't want your guys on the street second guessing themselves at any time.
No.
That's the worst thing. I'm not a police officer. I don't make believe I'm one. I don't even want to attempt to think I know what it's like to be one. But I've spoken with enough of them. I have good friends. Some of your deputies, I won't mention any names, are lifelong friends.
Yeah.
And they're actually in the law enforcement division, which we'll talk about later, some of the stuff you got going on there. You don't want your guys in the middle of an arrest to think about getting in trouble. You want them to rely on their training and the rules that they learned and just do their job.
Right.
And then let the pieces fall as they may. As long as they follow the rules, they have nothing to worry about. It's the same thing we talked about earlier.
And it isn't just that I want that. The public wants that.
Of course.
They want their law enforcement people to be able to do their job, and they don't want them marginalized by politicians that say, I'm more interested in my political sort of views on this, and we're just going to sort of wink and nod, not pay attention to that law. We're going to tell you you can't enforce it.
This is part of the problem in my eyes in this country as well, as far as it comes to law enforcement. The head of police departments are now not, I gotta word this, I gotta massage this in a way where I don't anger too many people. I feel that the chiefs of police departments are becoming more of a politician rather than more of a police officer.
Well, let me address that if I can. I believe that look, the chiefs want to do their jobs. They're in this business. They most of them have worked all through their careers on the street, and they've made all the right sacrifices. And they breathe law enforcement and communities being safe and building relationships with people. Where the chiefs begin to run into a problem is, in most cases, they're appointed. And they're appointed by the mayors. And the mayors are people who are driven
By votes.
by votes in politics. So while, if you think about this, if you're a chief of police and you are raising your family, you've worked your way up the chain, you're making a good salary, a lot of responsibility, suddenly you say, well, I don't think this is a good idea because this isn't conforming with where we need to go, or it's not upholding the laws the way I understand them, and you're told by your boss, who happens to be a politician, hey,
This is what I
this is
want.
what I want. You have to make a decision. Am I willing to give up my livelihood for my family? Or am I going to do what I was trained to do? And most chiefs will do what they're trained to do and will push back, but there are those, in those instances, where they're faced with a pretty difficult dilemma.
It's an executive order, pretty much, same thing.
If you want, you can run through Mitchell and Obama.
Okay, we got our audio fixed on that. We're gonna go and go back to, I believe, media 3, which is Mayor Mitchell speaking about DACA and his opinion on the Trump's plan to phase it out.
Daca program with Trump just kind of said, hey, Congress, you got 6 months to write legislation. This executive order goes away, figure it out. Is that going to affect the city? Because I know the city has probably a larger undocumented population than most in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's hard to know how many people avail themselves of DACA here, but there are a lot. There are a lot of school children too, and I just think it was a really poor move on the part of the president. You can explain it away as being a step to placate his political base, but you know what? It affects a lot of people in very real ways. And Congress, he didn't need to do that to get Congress to act. We all can agree that Congress should have been doing immigration reform. Should have done immigration reform a long time ago. It's still, they can still do it without the president taking any particular action. And yeah, this may create some greater urgency for them, but I just think it's just an unnecessary step, and it's going to cause suffering among a lot of innocent people. We're talking about people who, in many cases came over to this country, and here in New Bedford, and our particular case from places like Guatemala, or the Dominican Republic, or the Azores, mainly in Portugal, Cape Verde. Those are our most recent immigrants, and a lot of those people don't know their homeland. They came over at such a young age; they barely speak the language of their place of origin, and they're in no situation to go back and restart their lives. This is something that's going to uproot a lot of folks, and I hope Congress acts, but the president didn't have to create this problem.
Over the next few months, eligible individuals who do not present a risk to national security or public safety will be able to request temporary relief from deportation proceedings and apply for work authorization. Now, let's be clear. This is not amnesty. This is not immunity. This is not a path to citizenship. It's not a permanent fix. This is a temporary stopgap measure that lets us focus our resources wisely while giving a degree of relief and hope to talented, driven, patriotic young people. It is the right thing to do. Excuse me, sir. It's not time for questions, sir. Not while I'm speaking. Precisely because this is temporary.
And there you go. You hear from the mayor, his perspective on it, Sheriff. And then you also, we went back to 2012, where basically President Obama is saying what the president now is currently doing. This is a stopgap measure until you get your act together and put something on paper and make some darn laws by it.
It's interesting. First of all, the initiative through the executive order was unconstitutional to begin with, so it was illegal. But let's put that aside for a minute. Going to the mayor's point, he had said, I don't think that the president needed to do this. President Obama did it because Congress wasn't and hadn't dealt with this issue of immigration reform. So he decides this is the right thing to do. It's unconstitutional, but I'm doing it anyway, and probably thought, okay, it's a temporary fix, meaning Congress needs to do something. Did Congress do anything? Of course they didn't. So you know what the president's now saying? If you don't do something, Congress, in 6 months, you will have made the decision that these kids have to go back, okay? Or come up with some other solution or how we're going to deal with it. But you need to deal with immigration reform. This talking that's gone on for years and years is all it is. It's the Gang of Eight bill was really a disaster. It was a broad-based, shallow bill that really didn't deal with the issues, but it satisfied both parties' political
It made them
goals.
both come out looking good.
Trying to look good, right?
Yeah.
But of course, it didn't go through, and the public wasn't stupid. So now people, you know why people are getting behind? We have a president of the United States now that's finally saying, "You don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. You all were elected to do a job. You're not doing it. So I'm telling you right now, you got 6 months to get this done, and otherwise, we're going to move forward and do whatever we have to do to start to get the laws in place again and enforced equally across the board." And I believe Congress realizes, whoa, the president's put it in our lap now. If we don't do something, people already don't think we do anything anyway. Their favorability rating's like 12%
Yeah,
or something.
I mean,
people are fed up with them, and the
I
president
think
knows
New
it.
Bedford parking
Yeah.
enforcement has higher ratings than Congress right now.
So the president, look, the President Trump, we've got a president now who understands how to get it done. And he understands these people have been playing politics all these years, and they're not doing it anymore, and the people aren't going to let them, as long as they have a president who's going to stand strong on their behalf and get things back to where they belong.
At this point, you would think that Congress would get their act together, knowing that the Americans spoke out and took an outsider and chose him as the chief executive in this country. At that point, these guys that have been sitting back and just playing political games for the past 15, 20 years, which is a whole nother story because I'm all about term limits, they should have been put on notice back in November, and yet we're still here.
Right.
And you and I were speaking earlier, and now today it came in the news that Trump is ruining his base by talking with Pelosi and you know, and going to Chuck Schumer and playing the game, where you and I both kind of are thinking that we see over the car in front of us, as I put it, and see where the next guy's going, the off-ramp to success in forming a bill where he's done with Mitch McConnell's and the Paul Ryans who are just sitting back and losing their conservative way. And he says, you know what, if you don't want to do a deal with me, I'll get the deal done somewhere else.
Yeah, he may not, look, he's going to, one thing about this president is I think his decisions and the things that he's doing now, since he's gotten in, are really sort of targeted toward government's going to run like a business. It isn't going to be, the shareholders are the people who elected us. And you shareholders over here have been robbing these people blind and not taking care of the things that are supposed to give them the benefits.
Absolutely.
So you know what? I get it. I can see through it. And I don't care if this group doesn't want to do it, I'll give this group an opportunity. But we're going to do it.
Somewhere along the line, it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. One way or the other. And you know what's going to happen? These two groups are going to start to figure out, wait a minute, there's going to be a realization point where they're going to go, holy smokes, we really are at the bottom of the barrel, and the public is now looking to get rid of us.
Absolutely.
And not because the president's done anything wrong, it's because he's put them in the position where either they're going to have to do something or they're going to have to stay in the old model that it doesn't get anything accomplished for people, and they're going to be out of office.
All right, Sheriff, we're going to, on this show, what we're going to try to do is get as many questions from the viewers
Sure.
as possible. They may get off topic, they may not. Right now, we have a first question from a Bonnie. She asks, Sheriff, why are you set at breaking up families? What she means by that, I think it's your stance on immigration and your support for...
Look,
I think it's to do with immigration. It may be, I don't know what she's...
Sounds like it. Look, I grew up in a family of 13 children. I understand family. And I appreciate family. But I also grew up in a family. My father was an immigrant, and my father came here the right way. My father never looked over his shoulder when he walked down the street because he didn't need to. But the fact of the matter is if my father had come here illegally and brought me here illegally, then you know what? It isn't the laws of the United States that were already in place and the system that has been here to provide families to come here from other countries the right way. They're not to blame.
No,
The parents are to blame.
absolutely.
So if you want to ask, from my perspective, I think the question, it may be, in my view, is a little, I respect the question, but it's a little misplaced.
It
The
absolutely-
question needs to be to the people who made the decision either to come here illegally, knowing they were doing that, and putting their family in that kind of a situation. Why did you put your family in a situation where they could be separated?
I agree with you. I come from a family of, I'm a first generation American. My mom came here when she was young, 10, 8. My dad came here when he was 17. All done the right way.
Right.
As a matter of fact, my mom worked with an attorney later on as a citizen to help a lot of family members get here legally. My mom spoke English. She was educated. So she was, she was really helpful in a lot of the community getting into this country legally. And I remember as a young child watching people come to my house and an attorney meeting them there to get this
Yes.
done the right way. Family members of those in Portugal at the time, or when they were here on a visiting or a visa, they took care of it then.
It's interesting.
So to me, I just don't understand.
I was with a reporter had come to visit me and interview me from Telemundo, and we were chatting, and he was telling me, my brother and my sister and I, my mother brought us here when we were very young, and I'm a dreamer. But he said my father stayed back in the country where they were from, and then after about 5 years or so, he finally said, "That's it. I'm going to the United States because I'm not going to be separated from my family." He came. He got caught. He was deported. Couldn't come back for at least 10 years. Over that course of time, his parents got divorced. And I said, I feel very badly that your family went through that. It's very sad. I said, and I'm not meaning this in any kind of a disrespectful or uncaring way. But let me ask you a question. If your mother had not come here illegally and brought you all here, made a decision knowingly to bring you here illegally, would the outcome be different for your family right now? Would it be intact probably and maybe not separated the way that you are? And he said, you know what? In fairness to him, he said, you know what? I
Yeah.
never thought about it that way, and you're right. You're right.
People these days have a hard time with self-responsibility.
Yeah. But you care, Chris, just like I do. Even in that example for that individual, it hurt me to hear him talk about what happened with his
yeah.
family. But how many people can you keep saying it's okay, till the infrastructure in the United States of America, our medical system, our schools and everything else can no longer sustain, and the people who came here the right way, the legal residents and our American citizens, are being given less and less and they're getting less and less for the money that they otherwise would have had going to bigger schools or more books or whatever, because they now have to give it to so many people who are coming here who aren't supposed to be here.
It's something that needs to be fixed for many reasons: financial reasons, legal reasons,
Moral reasons.
and moral reasons. You're correct, and for reasons like that.
Right.
The way we're doing things opens the door for families to be. People don't see it that way.
Right.
You come here illegally, you're opening the door for a travesty in your family. Whereas if you know, hey, we can't do that anymore, then that avenue is not available anymore, and there's a less of a chance of a situation like that occurring.
And do we believe, Chris, do you believe that any one of us, where we thought that any family, if we could sustain and all the support, all the hospitals and all the school buildings we needed, everything else, would any one of us really deny in our hearts any kid or any family that wants to have a new opportunity that maybe isn't having one in their own country? Of course we would.
There's nobody of a good moral character that wants to see any child displaced,
Right.
or any mother trying to figure out what she's going to do to feed her children.
Correct.
I don't care what you vote for. And for anybody that tries to say, oh, you do this and you support that, shame on you.
Right.
Because there's nobody that thinks that. Let's move on to the next question. I've heard this one since I worked there. Is Ash Street Jail closing soon? That's from Eusebio.
No. Ash Street Jail is the oldest operating jail in the United States of America, and it's probably one of the cleanest, quietest, safest jails in the country. Look, from day one, they were trying when I was first running, saying, you know, other sheriffs prior to you wanted to close it, and so forth and so on. And I said, you know what? Before we go build another jail that looks a little nicer, but doesn't necessarily function better, why don't we use the money you otherwise would have spent on building new schools in places where kids are being taught in classrooms that have been around since Ulysses S. Grant was president, where they're picking their feet up off the floor, kids who have done nothing wrong, you know, where they can get after school programs and where they can get, so they don't come to jail. How about that? How about let's focus for once in this country on what we should be doing on our policies and investing our monies in the front end so a kid never has to walk through a door of a jail. That's what we need to do.
Seems like a lot of people are more concerned with fixing other than raising.
Right. It's an easy solution. Look, we are the least likely prison that anybody wants to go to in Massachusetts, believe me. We hear it from attorneys all the time. Somebody that can plead to a lesser charge and get a county bid and come to Bristol rather than do more time and go upstate will tell you, no way, I'd rather go upstate and do more time than go to Bristol. Not because we're mean or mad at people or make life difficult. We limit the alternatives to either sit in your cell and be bored or go to a program that's going to help you add tools to your toolbox that will allow you to leave and become successful and never come back here. Because that's our charge. And so if I put weights and TVs in a prison and let people hang out, play cards, and we still have programs, but they go, if they said that to me and said, you can go to a program and deal with your substance abuse problem or your anger management problem, or you can go lift weights, watch TV, and play cards. I'm lifting weights, watching TV, and playing cards because I don't want to go do
And
that
nothing
work.
productive comes
So
out
how
of
am
it.
I helping society and how am I helping those inmates? I'm not.
People don't look at it that perspective.
No, they don't.
The low-hanging fruit's always the easiest to grab.
Sure.
Sticking with this topic, I already had this question lined up, so we're going to tie Keanu's question in once I get going.
So we're going to presume that great minds think alike then.
Yeah, me and Keanu are
Yeah,
right on.
there you go.
We're right there together. We have a post-release mortality rate of addicts released from jail at an all-time high, meaning that once guys are getting out of jail, they're dying at a higher rate of overdoses rather than those who are on the street. It's just the post-mortality rate is sky high right now.
Well,
It's documented
What-
through several studies. What are you, in the Bristol County Sheriff's Office, you just got a $100,000 grant to fight the opioid crisis. What are you doing right now? It's also tied in with mental health at your facility, and it's also tied in, unfortunately, with the suicides that you've been having at the jail. That's his question and mine tied in
Sure.
together. We're dealing with, you're talking about self-help in these programs. Are you doing anything mandatory with, I guess I can't say that because I know the answer. You can't force anyone to do what they don't want to do. And I'm a proponent of it. I've had 2 friends that I've put in rehab myself. And it only worked when they were ready, when
Right.
they needed my help. What are you doing to give these people tools when it comes to mental health, when it comes to the substance abuse, which in my mind are hand in hand? What programs are you offering? What are you trying to get more money for currently to help these people out during the opioid crisis?
that's a really important and great question. First of all, what we're doing is we have staff that actually will follow these individuals when they get out and make sure that they're targeted toward staying in the programs, substance abuse programs and other things. When they first come in, our staff are assigned to each inmate. We have someone assigned to each inmate. And they work with that inmate from that time, and particularly in the last 6 months, to find out what community you're going back to. If you're going back to Fall River, okay, well, here are the programs, here's the schedule for the programs, here's the people you want to contact at the unemployment office or here or there. We basically work with them and provide them a life skills plan before they ever leave, so they can stay in treatment, so that they can continue to get on, get to access whatever services, so they don't fall back into the old routines, and job placement program and so forth. That's one way we're dealing with it. The other way we're dealing with it is we're doing more treatment inside, where they would get shot before they leave to block the
Oh, so you are offering Vivitrol.
Vivitrol, and we're also looking at new medications that
There is a new
through a
one. that's
Suboxone
yeah.
kind of a treatment program that we're going to be using. But it shouldn't surprise people that the post-release is so high. 80% of the people that are in our prisons are, by and large, involved with drugs, okay? So stands to reason, if you're not able to access them while you're there, those who aren't going to continue into the program are going to go back out onto the street and face even more potent drugs than they did probably before they came in, and more often than not, get into it very quickly, causing them to get into a very dangerous situation. We, in Bristol County, we detox 2/3 more people in our county than any other
Well,
prison
studies
in the
show
Commonwealth.
the drug use in Fall River, New Bedford, so it goes hand in
Right,
hand.
so these are things that we're very concerned about, we're looking at. We're doing an education program with inmates who are even in on pretrial, who aren't even sentenced yet, to try to educate them about the dangers of opioids, staying away from opioids, how do you get treatment to start to get off opioids. We're doing that even if they're in for just waiting trial
Yeah.
for a very short time. And we have a live stream that runs in our visit area, so that the families, when they're waiting to go do visits, can understand and learn what are the signs, what are the symptoms and things that you have to be aware of to get your loved one help, or to deal with the situation that you have ongoing.
Sticking with the topic, we've discussed this, you and I, of the opioid crisis, excuse me. Officer safety. I remember when I worked there with the regional facility, as well as dispatch, when guys are coming in getting sentenced. We were dealing with watches where people swallow stuff, and it's got what goes in must come out,
Right.
drugs, or when they're hiding it during arrest, gets through the screening of the officer. You've had issues with it already at your department. You and I have discussed it. Officer safety when it comes in terms of fentanyl contact. What are you doing right now to show your officers and prepare them to screen, and what happens in case of any suspected heroin, which we should all suspect at this point contains the killer fentanyl in it?
Yeah.
When I look at a bag of dope, I just automatically think now that there's fentanyl in it.
Right.
So what have you changed your policies? Have you changed your training based on that thought?
Yeah, we are actually in the process of doing a lot of that. First of all, as you know, one of our officers, there was someone in our regional lockup. He thought the person that was laying on the bunk had something underneath them. He told them to get up and show their hands. They didn't. He went over. They showed their hands. There was nothing in their hands. He shook the blanket. When he did, a puff of drugs came up, and it was laced with fentanyl. The officer immediately started showing symptoms, confused, slurring his speech. We had to call the EMTs in. They had to Narcan him twice, and we had to have the fire department come in. The fire department had to come in and then decontaminate
Decontaminate
in
the area.
Tyvek suits. This is a whole new development in law enforcement and in the prisons that has raised the specter of danger to our officers, and not just in the prisons, on the streets, when police officers come up on something. This stuff, this car fentanyl, if you touch a grain of it,
Yes.
it can kill you.
It was used in Russia during the hostage takeover.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that, but I don't know the exact dates or times, but they threw some carfentanil into the HVAC system to subdue everybody. But the stuff was so potent that it killed everyone.
Right. Yeah, and this is the problem, and the public needs to know it. And I have to say thank you to you all. You know, this is such a great opportunity for people through this, New Bedford Guide program, to be able to get important information, because this isn't just about the prisons; it's about families at home.
Absolutely.
If you have someone that's using in your home, and they get something that they think may be marijuana, but it's laced with fentanyl, and you, as a mother or father, walk in there and touch it, and you don't know what you're dealing with, this is serious stuff.
Absolutely.
And we are in a very dangerous time because of this, and we have to educate. And really, what you're doing is so, I mean, you're saving lives by having this program, and being able, not just tonight, but all the programs that you're going to be providing with this information. It's critically important. And so, sorry about the taking the moment to do that, but it's important to tell you
I've
guys
had
that
conversations with you. Like I said at the beginning of the show, you and I could just keep going. So
we could
keep going.
But really, it's so important, and so I just wanted to say thanks for that.
No, I appreciate it. Thank
and,
you.
And I want to know to the people to know that not only do you need to worry about what's going on in our prisons and on the street with our law enforcement, you need to worry about what's going on in
At home.
your neighborhoods and at home.
At home.
And this whole thing about the legalization of marijuana and all of this stuff, you know, there are people that are lacing marijuana with this stuff.
It's fun up until the point where you're getting marijuana with fentanyl in it.
Yeah,
So
well,
and I actually use
and
that
not-
sentence.
and you
Hey,
don't
the
know.
legalization of marijuana, it's great, it's fun.
Yeah.
Up until the point where you're getting a bad dose off somebody because they just want to make money because they got the best stuff.
Right. I mean, imagine,
It's the
you know,
oldest trick in the book.
imagine your 3-year-old son walking down the street, or your 5-year-old, not walking down the street, but walking in the house or neighborhood, and happens to just pick up this bag and it's got fentanyl in it. That child's not going to be there. That child's going to die.
I had a guy on Facebook, a friend of mine, and I read through his post. I glanced through it quickly today. I was getting ready for the show, nerves all day long. We found a bundle of heroin, suspected heroin, on his front yard.
Yeah.
And he's got a 6-year-old, I believe, and a 3-year-old. Now, if he hadn't have found that, and the stuff was laced with fentanyl, and a little background on how fentanyl works. Fentanyl is, they try to add 1 microgram of fentanyl to 26 micrograms of heroin, or whatever that whole, you never know what's in heroin anymore.
Right.
So what happens is, it's like the poison Skittle. You throw it in the batch of heroin to make it all more potent, but there's no real chemist mixing heroin where you can disperse 1 microgram of fentanyl into 26, servings, we'll call it. I don't know the terms. I'm not a scientist. I don't plan to be one. I'm not even a talk
You don't
show
even look
host,
like
but I'm
one.
doing good right now. And what happens is that 1 microgram ends up in 1 bag, 1 serving. So one of those 26 bags is going to kill somebody.
Yeah.
Now, one of those 26 bags could have been in that child's front yard and he could have played with it.
So
People don't realize it. And the guy went, picked it up, called his police department, grabbed it. Like, dude, do not touch this stuff at this point.
We're going to gloves, higher grade gloves for our officers. We're going to revise our procedures about searching in cells. We're looking at masks, the types of masks that
Yeah.
EMTs have to wear. Our medical staff, same thing. Look,
The game has evolved.
yeah, and you know what? What we have to ask ourselves, we can't just keep, and I'm not speaking of you and I, I'm speaking of us as a society. We can't keep pretending it's somebody else's problem and just talk about it, yeah, it's dangerous and on and on. The question is, do we have the will to do anything about this? Because the drug issue hasn't gotten better, it's gotten worse.
It's not going away.
So do we, we can't keep saying, oh, I feel so bad for that family that lost a loved one, was hooked on this.
Sooner or later, that devil's coming to your door.
Yeah, and maybe to someone in your family who's at a very young age, who's perfectly innocent, didn't do a thing, but just happened to pick something up that happened to be laced with it.
Tell everybody that all the time. Like, it's easy to say, oh, look down on that drug addict, look down on this. But you know what? Your kid might not be using drugs, but you can still be victim to drug usage. Whether
Yeah.
it's at a gang shooting or picking up a bag of fentanyl or doing whatever. It's a societal issue where people got to stop turning their heads to it and saying, oh, it doesn't affect
But I guess where I come to the crossroad is at the point where, look, we've seen the drug problem go on and go on and go on. So here's generation 1 and 2. We got number 3 coming. Are we just going to keep sort of reacting and saying, well, we still want to have treatment for people that need it. But where do we draw this line and say, okay, we can't have another generation fall into this basket? where we have to start saying, okay, we're going to give you this, give you that. We have got to do something for the generation that's coming so they don't have the same issue.
And I tell people that all the time. We are in the business of fixing. We need to get into the business of raising. And
Right.
that's the issue where the disconnect with a lot of people is that they feel that, oh, my parents did this and I didn't get that and I did this, now fix me here. No, we have to help people be parents
Right.
and start at a younger age and build them up as parents and build them up as families so that way there's less issues for the children as they get older.
Yeah, we got to start talking about things like
We gotta just change the
character,
whole-
responsibility.
Yeah. We gotta stop being, we gotta be more progressive to get back to the old ways of family.
Right. And that's a great point, Chris, because you know what? As you know, and I think all the viewers know this as well, that the family is the microcosm of society. So when the families started to, when the jet age came, we used to have neighbors. When mom was at the grocery store and dad was working, if you ran through your neighbor's garden, you can bet one parent was going to find out about it because you had a family network, because neighbors were well established, everybody knew everybody's neighbor, but then suddenly the jet age came. People started to move. And then you had this thing about people would say, geez, I don't know who my neighbor is anymore.
Yeah.
That was a discussion for a while. And then it was moms started going into the workforce, okay? And so moms weren't there. So then you had this discussion around latchkey kids. They were the ones that were going to come home from school, which was a very small percentage, but and then it grew and grew because more moms went to the workplace, and suddenly then there became daycare, right? And so then and around the same times, all the sports heroes we looked up to, not all but some, started getting involved in drugs, and they were no longer people we thought were the ones to
Wasn't as
follow.
innocent.
And then we started having problems in our institutions because we parceled out the responsibility of family to the schools, right? That they didn't used to have, the role of raising the kid and dealing with the discipline issues and things. And mom and dad were coming home from work and they were tired. They'd try to get the kids to do the homework, but and the life changed.
Yeah.
And suddenly we started to lose what really kept us together, the core of sitting at the dining room table. Like I mentioned to you before, there aren't very many dining room tables being sold anymore, even used. But that was a great place. That was the place, at least for an hour a night, that you sat with your family, and one of my brothers would say, if that guy's picking on you, here's what you need to do. And my mother would like, oh, no, don't do that. Go talk to the principal, right? But you learned the lessons. You learned life's lessons. You learned from the experiences your older brothers were having or sisters. And that was the place you exchanged ideas and learned to socialize appropriately and all that. We lost that.
We've talked about a lot tonight, but one thing that people should get out of this show, eat dinner with your family. Seriously.
No question about it.
Seriously, take your time.
You know, I was talking to a guy from Rehoboth. I know you want to go to a question, just say this real quick. I was speaking to a friend of mine in Rehoboth that said, Rehoboth's not a huge community in comparison to a lot of others. Why don't you start something like a proclamation in your town to say, eat dinner with your kids 2 nights a week? Start with that. That we're going to be a community that we are committing to eating with our family together 2 nights out of the week. Start there and get something going nationally.
Yeah.
Start.
It all starts off with a dumb little idea that turns out to be brilliant. And that could be one of them, because I'm a firm believer in that. I remember growing up, looking at my little TV, watching the news with my dad. And, my mom would make pork chops at least 3 days a week, it seemed like. And we'd all have to eat together, and I'd have to eat it all, or else I'd be in trouble. But yeah, dinner was mandatory at my house.
Oh,
We
yeah.
all sat
Home by the
down
time the
next to each
streetlights
other.
are on, yep.
My sister was here right beside me. My mom was here. My dad was here because the TV was there, and I'd be elbowing her. And,
Oh, yeah.
but we did it every night.
Well, see, we did grace before dinner. We had dinner. Grace after dinner. Then we had to go you got off pretty easy. We had to do 5 decades of the rosary, plus novenas every night, which was also, as a kid coming up, you didn't want your friends knocking on the window looking in, hey, can Tom come out and play? And he's in there saying the rosary, right? Because that wasn't cool when you were so young. But honestly, I look back and I go, you know what? That was so valuable. Even if you weren't paying attention, you were elbowing one of your brothers or sisters, you were doing something together as a family that was so important, and it became part of your love center.
I don't know if you've lost anybody, which,
Mom and dad.
yeah. Don't you wish some days that you could have that dinner table one time, People don't realize that.
Right.
And some people have never had that.
Well, you can, and you can. and you can have mom and dad there because you can tell those stories.
Yeah,
And so you can
true.
still do that.
I've had a question sitting in here, and it's a pretty good question, actually. Mia from Lewisburg, North Carolina. See, we're reaching out pretty far. She says, your mustache is fabulous, Sheriff. How long have you had it? Since I can remember, so it was before that.
Wow. Gee, I go all the way back to, a lot of years. I guess my kids have never.
Have you ever taken it off for like a week? Like,
No.
oh man, I'm going to try losing it?
No, and it's
And then
funny.
you look funny for like a week?
Yeah, well, I look funny anyway, you know. But no, I think probably since I was maybe, I don't know, 18 maybe? 19?
No kidding, huh?
Maybe 19, 20. I'm not sure. But I know one thing for sure. My kids always say, Dad, boy, I wonder what you would look like without, my kids are in their 30s, but what would you look like without a mustache? I said, I can't remember that far back, but I know that there was a time where I wasn't wearing one.
Great question. Glad to break it up. I'll let you decide what you want to talk about. I got 2 questions left. We've been here well over an hour, which I had a feeling we were going to end up doing. It's supposed to be, 40 minutes, half hour. Do you want to talk about the ICE 287G program? Or tonight, right now as we speak, your former colleague, Brian Gomes, is filing a motion. Did you read about it? The motion that he's filing tonight to cancel
I didn't
the
read.
Public Safety Committee due to lack of interest, what it seems like lack of interest from the administration and the chairwoman of the committee. Well, he filed a motion notifying City Council that this council is suspending a call at this time for a public safety summit. Due to the lack of support from the administration, the Committee on Public Safety and Neighborhoods chairwoman, along with others that feel at this time the city is a safe place to live, work, raise a family, and have a business, and further requesting that the administration and the police chief provide City Council with documentations that agencies such as the FBI, State Police, DHS, and other federal and state public agencies located in New Bedford are working with our public safety officials to combat gang violence, illegal guns, and drug dealers on a federal level collectively to bring safety to the entire city. He's also, it keeps going, and he's bringing in, 3rd District, letter be sent to 3rd District judges requesting that take every initiative under the law to protect the city, blah, 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 blah. He's calling to basically say, the heck with it. We're showing no interest
In having the summit.
in having the summit because it keeps getting shelved for some reason. This is something that should have happened months ago, but for some reason it's being shelved, and it's kind of what a Trump thing where he's like, hey, do it or get off the pot with this already.
Yeah.
So he's bringing it up saying, hey, if you don't want to do it, then say you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Have you spoken with Councilor Gomes or any member of the current administration, the mayor, police chief, anyone on the state level, to see what you can do as the head of your department, because I know you have law enforcement deputies, to help the city with crime?
Well, yeah, when I took over, one of the first things that I started doing was building partnerships.
Yeah.
I believe that partnerships are critically important with our state, federal, and local partners. And there should be no reason why we aren't doing that. And I work very closely with Chief Cordero. I think he's somebody that is looking to reach out. But I served with Councilor Gomes, and I can tell you, I don't know anybody more passionate about keeping this community safe than Councilor Gomes. And so, look, I get sometimes the frustrations. I had my own when I was on the council, when I thought certain things around public safety should have been done. They were very slow to come around. I try not to meddle in their politics because that's their business, but certainly do respect and understand the passion that Councilor Gomes has and has had all along about keeping the community safe. And when you have crime problems, and they continue, even though the agencies may be working and trying to deal with them, it's frustrating when you're in government to try to find some additional things that can work, and sometimes the wheels move slower than you want them to. That may be what you're seeing, and hopefully we started talking about this on the show.
Yeah.
That the idea of differing points of views can come together toward that common end.
Seems like
yeah.
the
So-
same narrative for every topic we
Yeah,
end up
but I
discussing.
do know, I mean, of course, I know the passion that Councilor Gomes has, and I respect that. He's been right on the forefront. And, and he will continue to, I know that. And the same with Chief Cordero. I mean, I've known the chief for a lot of years. He's a,
He's been on the job forever.
yeah,
so.
he's a caring guy, and he's somebody that's very passionate about getting into these communities, getting his people talking to these individuals. So
Michael's
it's,
done a few walkthroughs with the chief, and he does want to get back to the basics. I think he's doing.
Yeah.
He named it. There was some fancy lingo that they used, but basically some good old fashioned door to door community policing. He's
Yeah.
trying to instill again down in the Ward 2 area, I believe, wasn't it? Ward 2.
He's done North Front Street, Root Street,
Yeah.
South End.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have really what we were talking about at the beginning, Chris, which you raised as well, which is this idea that we have two very passionate people around making people safe. And it's oftentimes, sometimes there's other things that step into the middle of those conversations that don't really have anything to do with the two people that are trying to get to that common place. So when you get those two people together, you find out, wow.
We're actually trying to do
we're
the
on the
same
same,
thing.
we're going down the same road, but there's things over here that are distracting us that really aren't.
It's the small stuff that
Yeah.
always does that. And
Yeah.
the thing is, that's what separates that's the difference between individuals. Is very little.
Yeah.
Good individuals.
Right.
If you're a good person and you're a good family man, and you're looking to be a productive member of society, the chances are you and the next guy are very much alike.
Yeah, and if you can, when you find these pulls and tugs, if you can say, let's step back and say, what are you looking for? What am I looking for? Wait a minute, they're the same thing. Okay, how is it that we seem like we aren't speaking the same language? We really are. We actually feel the same way. How can we do this together? What is it that you think would work better for you? If my idea is not the best idea, then what would a good idea be? Throw that back to the other person, see if there's something that might still satisfy everybody, and still accomplish what
The
all of us
chances
want
are
to
that there is going to be somewhere in the middle and that it work. And the middle,
Sure.
believe it or not, may be where you guys are just already at. It's just you just
Yeah.
can't get the final handshake to.
Yeah,
Let me move on to sticking with the topic. You tried in 2003 to help patrol the city. If you were asked to again, well, Mayor Killitz did everything in the world to stop you. I remember back then, different reasons, political, of course. And if you were asked again, or even if you weren't asked again, I know you have other task forces, which will be my follow-up question. Do you want to help the city at this point with your assets? Being a county, you are entitled to a lot more federal funding
right.
that could actually help these municipalities that have, you get the fire department taking $100,000 from their budget in New Bedford and giving it here, or I might have got it wrong, somebody might have gave them 100. Why don't we just figure out where we can get our top dollar? I mean, you're generating a ton of money off immigration. Why don't we take your money and keep it in Bristol County and use it to help the drug problem in Bristol County?
That would be a good question for the legislature, since they sweep it out of my budget and underfund me by $9 million.
And you're probably the most money-producing sheriff in the state at this point.
Pretty close. Pretty close. I think Suffolk, I think we probably bring in more than Suffolk now, and Plymouth does some marshal stuff in immigration. But I would tell you that, look, I've always been about partnerships. I've always been about, look, I don't care whether it's a Dartmouth canine that responds to this city or that city, or somebody else responds to Dartmouth. If they need it, go and be there. Get the closest canine or get the closest task force you need and utilize them.
I was at a
And-
barbecue the other day, and one of the officers was like, "Man, I don't care what your badge says.
Right.
If I'm wrestling with a guy, and you could say,
Of course.
you could say Maryland for all I care,
Of
as long
course.
as you're there to help me get home to my family."
Isn't it interesting? We had a long conversation about 9/11.
Yeah.
And we spoke about what happened down there, right? We didn't look at anybody's badge or patch. We didn't care.
You exchanged them, for,
There was some of that, yeah. But we also exchanged good stories and a lot of things with people around the country that we recognized we all had a common purpose.
Yeah.
And so I think it comes back to we're back to that again from what we started with, which is, look, we're all here to do the same job. regardless of what resource you have, if you're saying, I don't want to use that resource, and I'd rather have people be less safe or let somebody get away that otherwise might not have been able to do that and commit another
Just
crime.
for the name of department and
Yeah,
boundaries.
because
It makes no
because you
sense.
just think that you don't want to work with this department because they got this uniform or that uniform. You got to ask yourself, why?
I know the answer that you would love to step in and help, and I know that, and I know you'd love to be a partner in it, and I understand the struggle with politics, being that you're one of the only Republicans in the area, and a lot of the mayors
Yeah.
are not. So I think that also has to do with a lot of the tension. So we're still fighting to get there. You do have a lot of task force members
Yeah,
that are law enforcement. Bristol County Sheriff's Office, I know of a couple. One just, actually a friend of mine just did a bust in Dartmouth, helped out the Dartmouth
Yes.
guys. And he was actually exposed at the time to some heroin that went flying in the middle of the warrant apprehension. What other task forces are you involved in that actually helps protect this area? Because I don't think, and I know, I don't think this, I know that a lot of people in this area think that your job, which it mainly is at this point, is just care and custody.
No, it's
You're doing a lot of big things. I mean, you were part of the big bust that they just found $2 million out west in that state. That was with the FBI, I believe.
I think it was
Department. DHS.
DHS.
DHS, yeah. And then you did some stuff at UMass with the FBI when they did the letters with Xanax. What was that?
Yeah,
Powder that was going around. Anthrax.
yeah.
And then you're doing a lot of the warrant apprehension stuff.
We've got
how
a
many
homeland-
units and how many law enforcement deputies are patrolling Bristol County or anywhere in Massachusetts? Or I know that you do some stuff with East Providence as well. How many deputies do you have right now performing law enforcement duties in this county on a day-to-day
I
basis?
think we're up to probably close to 200, I believe.
That's wonderful.
Then that includes the ones that are running up to the federal courts with ICE
Yep.
detainees. We
Detainees.
have our first team that arrives in Boston actually serve as the court officers for the immigration court up there. We have deputies that drive deportees down to JFK Airport. We have 2 Homeland Security full buses that are always up at our property that we utilize that our deputies drive for transports and so forth to airports in different states and so forth. But we also have people, somebody assigned full-time to the FBI Terrorism Task Force. We have another individual assigned to ICE investigations and gangs. We have people that are working with DEA. We've actually had for almost all my years the largest joint regional task force in the state of Massachusetts, where we have people from even PDs in Barnstable.
Yep.
Outside our county, of course, within our county. And these guys have been working together for years and years and years. And so we're out doing drug interdiction, drug undercover operations. And I think I mentioned our Homeland Security Task Force, which is also meets monthly. We put we have speakers come in, as well as we look at current threats and we look at response and things like that. We train. One of my commander of that unit, Colonel Gavigan, is one of the few certified to do tabletop exercises, where we'll go to New Bedford, for example. We did over at the Buttonwood Zoo, and it's a half-day tabletop exercise, multiple situations unraveling. We've got media stations, we've got EMTs are here, fire there, police there, DPW, and all these people have to respond to these different scenarios, and then we debrief at the end. And
A lot of people don't realize, but me being a gun guy, and I've read into other stuff, that Colonel Gavigan's nationally known.
yeah, oh yeah,
He's not just a normal guy that's
yeah.
just a deputy in Bristol County. He's actually a nationally known figure when it comes to law enforcement and task force and terroristic activity.
Sure.
He's well established in the community.
Yeah, and he does trainings. In fact, he's putting.
He's doing something up in Massachusetts.
Yeah,
recently.
he's preparing another big one. But we do it for communities. We do it for organizations.
Yep.
We have a program that we do up at New Bedford Folk, their students there, where they can actually participate. Part of the semester is to become these first responders.
Perfect.
Yeah. So there's lots to
Part of the
do.
raising. I'm gonna end it with this, Sheriff. What do you want? What do you foresee? I mean, you've been in 20 years now.
20 years.
20 years. What's the next chapter in Bristol County? Like, what do you want to branch out to? Are we going to where I think you're going, where you want to start raising awareness in families and children and move out of the let's fix your problem, let's start young? Is that something that you
Yeah.
foresee your agency doing?
Not only do I see our agency, we're already moving in that direction. We basically run the juvenile court program, drug addiction program. We're very involved in the schools with a lot of our programs, but we need to do more. We are not only in Bristol County, but policy-wise, nationally, I believe that we need now to direct our efforts and our energies, still dealing with the people who we have to deal with that have issues, but begin to put the focus at the front end. We cannot continue filling beds in our prisons with new generations and talking about it and saying, well, this will fix it because this person will get out and be better. No, it's too costly to rehabilitate. The percentages of success are very low. So why are we saying we're going to just keep focusing here and reacting to it and not dealing with the front end and putting real programs in place that are going to make a difference to keep the kids from ever coming through that front door or getting involved in drugs or whatever it is? Because we know moms and dads are busy. Many of them aren't home. There's some kids involved in very dysfunctional homes. We know these things exist. The question is, are we going to do anything about it? Are we just going to sort of make ourselves feel better that we're reacting to trying to fix things that are happening, and while these other things are unraveling, pretending they're really not? They're happening, and we need to be honest about it. We need to deal with it. So that's where we need to go, not only in Bristol County, but across this nation. And I am going to continue working with Washington to try to get that projected to that new kind of trajectory where we can think differently about our policies.
I mean, we're at the stage where the definition of insanity, we're already past that. Where we just keep
Yeah.
beating our heads and doing the same thing wrong over and over and over
You hit
again.
the
And the
nail
worst
on the
part
head.
we're doing is we're taking away money from the children and throwing it at these programs and that are proven to be unsuccessful. I mean, I also just don't believe in just throwing a guy in a cage and saying when you're done, you're done.
Right,
That I don't believe in as well.
right.
But we need to focus and we need to change our thought because we're at the point now where it's broken. We've been broken for a long time, and it's time to change our thinking on how we got here
Right.
and what we are doing to not be here anymore. And I agree with
And
you.
it goes back
100%.
to what I was saying in the beginning. The fundamental question that we collectively have to ask ourselves at this point: are we going to seize our moment in history to take the challenge that's been given to us to provide a better tomorrow for the next generations? That's the question that stares every one of us in the face.
Yeah.
And that's the question that we have to honestly answer. And if the answer is no, then we will have said to our kids and our grandchildren,
I was selfish. I didn't worry about you.
didn't matter. We knew this was coming. We knew we were making a worse tomorrow for you, and we just didn't care. And I don't believe that that is really what America is all about, nor do I think most Americans are that way. I think we can become distracted and get lost sometimes, but now is the time for us, in this moment where we're seeing the perspective around the floods, around the things that have happened, 9/11 on the backs of all this each year. How many times do we have to keep talking about it every anniversary? Let's do it.
Rise from the ashes. Don't sit in them.
Right.
Sheriff, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I
And thanks for,
appreciate
really, New Bedford Guide, you guys are doing an incredible service that I don't even think understand at this point, for the people of the community and being able to educate them and how they can move ahead, how they can be helpful, how they can be part of something.
Yeah.
And this media is the one that's going to move this country forward.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to
Social media is where it's at, and Mike's ahead of the game when
Yep.
it comes to New Bedford Guide. He set up this situation for us all,
Hey, we're excited in the region. We're all excited for what's coming.
We're trying to make
'cause
it
it's-
happen, you know, we're
It's
trying to
great.
make it happen.
It's awesome.
All right, guys, thank you everybody tonight for watching this lengthy episode. It was only one guest, and we're actually going to try to get 3 in on one show. I promise the next time we'll have less questions for the sheriff, and I may cut him off a couple times because him and I have the same exact problem. We do talk a lot. Thanks again, everybody. Thursday, 7 o'clock, we're going to try and get different guests. Feel free to send questions in. You can email me at chris@newbedfordguide.com with any questions, concerns, ideas for future programming. Any questions that I can relay to the sheriff that he may be able to help you with, I can also do that. Email me. And you can also subscribe to our live feeds at any time by clicking on the video right now, and you'll see a little subscribe button right there, and you'll be notified when we go live. Thanks, everybody, again. Appreciate your time and your viewership.